Let's kick it.
This is Dr. Joe Martin with Real Men Connect, and I am kicking it with Doree.
Welcome to the Kicking It with Doree show. This is Doree Allen Nieves. Dr. Joe Martin is an award-winning international speaker, author, educator, and certified man builder. He's authored or co-authored 9 books, including Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Dad Would Have Taught Me, The Real Man Spiritual Leader Blueprint, and Gifts and Handkerchiefs, A Lesson in Servant Leadership. Joe has spoken for more than 750 businesses, organizations, churches, colleges and universities, and K-12 schools and districts, and he was voted National Speaker of the Year by the Association for the Promotion of Campus Activities. He's also the host of Real Men Connect, the #1 top-rated radio podcast on iTunes for Christian men. To find out more about his remarkable story of redemption from abject poverty, abandonment, abuse, and addiction, visit him on the web at realmenconnect.com or email realmenconnect@gmail.com. And so now I would like to welcome to the show Dr. Joe Martin. Welcome to the show, Dr. Joe.
Thank you, Doree. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
I heard Dr. Joe talk at a conference a few years ago, and I was really impressed with what he had to say, and so I'm glad that our paths have crossed again. He's going to give us a lot of information, ladies, about not only things that we need to know about men in our relationships, our brothers, just in general, but also those of us that are raising boys, that have sons. You know, there's some special things we need to know about there. And this is our special Father's Day episode. And so we want to make sure that men, regardless of whether they're fathers, they might be husbands or not, they might be, someone's son, that we can relate to them better, because we all know that men and women are very different. We all have emotions and feelings and things like that as humans, but the way that we relate to each other is very different. The way that we communicate is very different. And there's some special and unique things that men deal with that we really may be aware of, but really don't understand as well as we should. And that's my goal today with this show, is for Dr. Joe and I to start or continue that conversation so that we can have better relationships and learn better communication styles and really accept and analyze and understand each other a lot better. I would like to start by first asking you, Dr. Joe, to tell us a little bit about Real Men Connect.
Well, Real Men Connect is basically a multimedia ministry to men that I created. Is for Christians, but not just for Christians. They just can resonate more with the message. But basically, the essence of Real Men Connect, why it was created, was the fact that we as men all desire. I haven't met a man yet who doesn't desire to be a successful husband, a great father, a strong leader in his community, to make an impact on society and to leave a legacy for his children. And if you ask any man, he's going to tell you, yes, I want to achieve those things. The problem is most of us as men were never shown how to do those things. Just think about it. If you think about all the things you want to achieve in your life, or as a success, even as a woman, you say, okay, great, I want to do those things. Then you ask the next question, was there a woman in your life who demonstrated that success to you? So most men out there were never shown by their fathers how to be a successful husband, how to be a successful dad, how to be a successful community leader, either because dad was not there in the home, or he was there in the home, but he was emotionally detached from his kids. So he was present, but didn't have a presence, or he had a dad who was maybe abusive, or all types of other dysfunction that come with that. So Real Men Connect is our attempt is to find those great men out there who have succeeded as husbands, as fathers, as community leaders, and spiritual leaders of their family, so they can be connected with other men who desire those same things. In other words, I tell in the simple version of this, Doree, is that I want to eliminate all the excuses that you don't know how to become the man God called and created you to be. So that's what we created. And I'm oversimplifying it, but we're talking about over 1,500 years of fatherhood, husbandhood, manhood experience of men who are respected and adored by their wives and their children, teaching other men how to succeed as men. So it's like a mentoring and discipleship network on steroids.
Well, that's awesome. It's what we need. And there's so many things that you just touched on right there. We're going to hit them all one by one. But I do believe that we have an epidemic of fatherless children all over this country, and our society is really suffering because of that. And I happen to grow up with my dad in the home. But of course, there's a lot of us that don't. And there's various, debates about whether or not, you really need a man. Like, do you really need a man to, help you raise children or whatever? And I've got my own feelings about that. And we'll touch on that a little bit later with single parenting. But I noticed that you're the author of several books. And one of them, you have a subtitle that says 201 Lessons You Wish Your Dad Had Taught You. What was the story behind that subtitle or that book? Is that a personal thing because maybe your father wasn't present, or were you trying to relate to other people that you've mentored?
No, actually, that book is part of my story, and it's called Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Dad Would Have Taught Me, because I grew up the son of a teenage mother. My mom had me at the age 16, so she was a single mom, and my dad left when I was 2, and I did not reconnect to him until later on in life. And so I grew up in a community in an inner city ghetto that was so big. When I say big, you're talking about 5 high schools and 2 malls. And I didn't meet a white child till I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And so the only males that I saw, and I use that word males because as large as our community was, there weren't many men, if any men. They said, well, how can you have a lot of males in your neighborhood but no men? Because we're males by birth, but we are men by choice. And we haven't talked about it, but I have what I consider my definition of a real man. And those men were not available. And so the males that were in my life were either very angry, they were addicted, they were violent, they were abusive. And I was abused as a child by a male who stepped in to, quote, fill that role of a man in my life. And so I had a lot of negative experiences with males in my life, to the point that I actually disliked and had a distaste for men, because I just thought they were manipulators, irresponsible, disrespectful. They were unfaithful, not loyal, that kind of thing. And so that book, Are You the Man, is that after I met a real man, and when I was 33 years old, who exposed me to what a real husband looks like, what a real father does, and what a real man does in this community, I said, wow, I can't believe I've gone this many years without knowing what a real man was. Because, you mentioned earlier about how some people believe you can survive without a dad in the home. I survived, and I achieved a lot of, quote, success, because I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, to go to college, graduated early at the age of 20, top of my university class. When I was 20 years old, the only African-American male in all of my classes, and I was voted student of the year. Made history in the state of Florida by becoming the youngest professor ever hired to teach in the state of Florida at the age of 24. Had my doctorate before I was 30 years old. And see, now the people out there will hear that and say, wow, see, he did it without a dad in the home. But you're missing the point. I succeeded as a male, but I failed as a man. And I ended up destroying my marriage because I had no tools. I knew what I didn't want to be based on the males I saw in my community, but I didn't know how to be the man I wanted to be. So I was avoiding what I didn't want, but didn't know how to pursue what I did want. And as a result of that, I ruined my marriage after 16 years. And I found myself looking in the mirror saying, what happened? How could you achieve this so much success and everybody thinks you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, but now you're sitting in a big old house with no one in the house but you? And how did your life end up here after where you started and had everything? And what I found out that I was missing a man. And I will say this, no good man can ever become a great man without the help of a godly man. And Doree, I need to say that one more time. Mm-hmm. That no good man can become a great man without the help of a godly man. Now, that's up for debate, but I ask you to challenge yourself, and especially if we have women out there in the audience listening to this, look at all the males you've had in your life, and you look at the ones who treated you the best. Now, I'm not saying that because he believes in God, he's going to treat you the right way, but I'm saying a man who actually was a great example of a good man, a good husband, a good father, and was respected in his community. So when I wrote that book, Are You the Man, I couldn't believe I went 33 years without knowing how to be a man. And so when my son was about 6 or 7 years old, I started writing notes of what I wish my dad would have taught me. And I actually came up with like 220 something things, but I thought that would be a bad subtitle for a book. So I narrowed it down to 201. And I put it in a book, and I had the book published, and I presented it to my son when he was 12 years old. And basically what I told him is that if something ever happened to me, you won't have done to you what was done to me, which was no instruction on how to love a wife, how to be a father, how to be a friend, how to be a leader on your job, how to serve your community, how to manage money. I said, I want to teach you all the lessons I wish my dad would have taught me so you would have it. Now my son is 21, so you're talking about 9 years he's had that book. So whenever he has a question, even when he's not around me, he can go right to the table of contents. What did dad say about whatever XYZ was? And there's a lesson on what I wish my dad would have taught me. You're talking about from the failures as well as successes that I've had as a man.
That is so powerful. That is a legacy right there. Even if no one else ever read that book, that is, wow. Just trying to take that in. That is awesome. You turned something that some people may have seen as negative, like, oh, okay, these are all the things that you missed, or these are the lessons that you wish you had learned. And now you're able to pass that on to your own son and countless other sons that may be, quote, fatherless. So that's amazing to me.
It's funny you just mentioned that. When I actually wrote that, it wasn't meant to be a book. It was just going to be my notes saved in my computer. But what ended up happening is I started traveling, speaking all over the country. I would get questions from single moms. And then, of course, I would give them advice to give to their sons or to their daughters, but especially their sons. And guess where I was pulling this information from? Those notes. And so I realized that they were really taking notes on this thing. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe I should turn this into a book and get this published. So I went to my son at the time when he was only, I think, Kendall was like 10 years old. And I asked my 10-year-old at the time for permission to, could I get this published as a book? Because I told him that it was only written for him and I wanted him to have it. So think about how honest that book was. Because when I was writing the notes, I didn't think anybody else would read it. So you're talking about being brutally transparent and honest about the lesson. So I didn't know. And I'm glad now I did not think that was going to be a book, because I was more honest than I probably would have been otherwise. And so when he gave me permission to do it, I decided to get it published and we put it out on the market. And now, believe it or not, Doree, we actually give the book away for free now.
Wow. It is so, so needed. I mean, again, we're going to get to the women's side in a moment, the single women in a moment. But if you wanted to say summarize, what would you say are those challenges or those things that, you know, make it so that there's a lot of males out there that don't become men, and why males fail?
Well, we'll start with, I think, is the elephant in the room, the most obvious thing. And I hope that the women who are listening out there in the audience, I know you have men too, and women need to hear this, because my heart breaks for women, because my mom was a single mom and I saw my mom go through so much heartache and so much pain. And then wouldn't you know, you would think that I would have learned from that, watching my mom and the women in my community suffer at the hands of a lot of males who did them wrong. And I did the same thing to my wife. And this is what I want women to understand before they throw us under the bus, is that one of the biggest challenges that we face as men is that we don't know what we're doing. See, it's assumed that we should know how to love you. It's assumed that we should know how to meet your emotional needs. It's assumed that we should know how to take care of our families and spiritually lead our families. We're assumed to know those things, but have you ever stopped and asked yourself, who was our blueprint? Where was show me the blueprint for you as a man. And so when you stop and think about it, if women actually thought about that, they wouldn't even get married to some of the males that they're dating. Because when you're dating a male, and I say he's a male because you don't really know if he's a man yet, the first question you need to ask yourself as a woman is, okay, who is pouring into him? Who mentored and discipled him? Who does he go to when he's stuck on stupid? Where does he go to for instruction on how to be a man? Who is teaching him how to love a woman? Who is teaching him how to raise children? You must see the original blueprint of that man. So if my ex-wife would have asked that question, no matter how many degrees she saw that I had, no matter how fine she thought I was, and how much money I made, she would have said, wait a minute, as much as I like Joe, he's not ready. He doesn't know. He can't possibly know how to love me because he hasn't been shown. Now that seems like so much common sense, but I just explained to you why we have a divorce rate that we have right now. Because most of us as men don't know how to do it. Not because we're stupid, not because we're irresponsible, not because we're crazy, not because we're insensitive. Most of us, now some of us are, but most of us just don't know any better. You've heard people say people have ADD, ADHD. What about ABT? Ain't been taught. And so we're talking about challenges. One of the biggest challenges that men face is ignorance. We don't know what we don't even know. And so if you can help us out as women to say, you know what, bless your heart. You are a decent man. You're trying your best, but you have no idea on what it is to take to be a man. How can you say that, Doree? Because who's your blueprint? What do you mean? Who do you go to? Who's the guy who can grab you by the shirt and instantly earn your respect and tell you, stop treating Doree that way? And so ignorance will be one of the biggest challenges I see. And here's the second one. It's one thing not to know. Then we have pride that stops us. We're afraid to ask another man for help. Because Doree, if I go to a man, if I'm 33 years old at the time, like I was, and I go to a man like I did with my spiritual father, and I told him, I said, man, I know you have 8 kids and you've been married for 30 years. Would you adopt just one more child into your family? Most men are not humble enough to ask for that type of help. So we will go around faking it as if we do know, because women assume that we should, and we'll go around pretty much hiding our ignorance. So we have ignorance, we have pride. And then we have what was one of my biggest pet peeves is apathy. Then we get frustrated if we're not succeeding. And then we just say, you know what? I don't care. I don't care. It's not important enough for me to learn the skills I need to be a husband. It's not important enough for me to get counseling for some of the pain of my past and the wounds and scars of my past to get the help that I need, so I don't pour that out into another woman or take it out on my children. We don't care enough to say, God, reveal to me the way you see me so I can see what my real issues are, so I don't blame other people for it. And so we have ignorance, we have pride, we have apathy. And I would say another thing, then we have lack of commitment. And I know the women out there will say amen to this, is that we will start something, but we won't finish it. We won't follow through, or we get the woman, we get married, and we don't do the necessary work to keep her in that relationship. The same things we did to pursue her, we don't continue doing that after we get her. So we don't commit to the process that this is a never ending process. There's no goal to saying, I'm a man, I'm done now. You must always constantly be growing. So a lack of commitment is a challenge for us. And if I would say anything else, I would say priority. Now we can go on with some other issues, but I will stop there and I will say priority. For the fact is, we major in minors when it comes to men. We think the most important thing is me providing for you and taking care of my family, which it is important, but it's not the most important thing. What difference does it make if I'm able to buy you 3 houses, but we never have a real home? What difference does it make if I can give you everything you want, but not provide you everything you really need as a woman, as a mom, for my children? And so a lot of times we put our priorities, we thinking because that's what society says is the most important thing. That's what we pursue, as opposed to asking God, what's most important to you? When I step into this family role, which will bring the biggest smile on your face? How much money I can save up, or how big of a home I can buy, or me leading my family the way you called me to lead them. So I'm building a legacy of faith. So I think those are some of the biggest challenges that men face.
You just said so much right there. I know that those of you that are listening are like, oh my goodness, yes, yes, yes. And even if you're not in church, you're like, yes, amen, yes. I want you to know that all of these key points that Dr. Joe Martin is giving us right now, all this knowledge he's blessing us with, will be included in the show notes for the episode. So it's basically just like a blog post. It has this episode and audio, of course, as you're listening to it. And then it'll have those key points. It'll have links to resources related to this episode. So as we continue on, those are the challenges for sure. And like you said, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We could probably do the whole show just about the challenges, but we want to also offer solutions. What would you say it takes to be a real man?
Well, because of my faith, I use Jesus Christ as my example. It's hard for me to look at any man that I thought lived this life better than he did and did it sacrificially, that he's to me the epitome of what a real man is. And even though we look at Jesus because of this divine nature that he has, there's a lot of men who've used that standard, and I've admired and respected them as men. My spiritual father is a great example. He's not Jesus Christ, but he uses Jesus Christ as his model of how to be a husband, how to be a father, and how to be a servant. Now, Jesus never had any children, and Jesus was never married. And so you say, well, how can he use him as a model? And here's my definition of a real man, and you'll see what I mean by Jesus Christ being an example. One, a real man leads his family spiritually. He leads his family spiritually. Well, Jesus was not a husband or a father, but we were his family. His disciples were his family. That's who he spent most of his time with, and he led them spiritually. So I'm responsible for my wife, my son, and my daughter. I have a 21-year-old son, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, and my wife, and they look at me for spiritual leadership. Now, we're not talking about I have to be a theologian or an apologetic or know the Bible backwards and forwards. No, that means I must be connected to God in a way that I'm seeking his guidance and his word on how to spiritually lead my family. That's why they trust me, not because I'm leading based on my own intelligence and my own knowledge, that I'm willing to submit and say, God, you have a better way. You have a blueprint. Now show me how I need to lead this family. So a real man spiritually leads his family. And Jesus did that with his disciples. The second thing that a real man does, I believe, and is based on looking at Jesus Christ's life, is that he loves and serves others sacrificially. He loves and serves others sacrificially. And what I mean by that, look at what Jesus was willing to do. Jesus put himself second and he put other people first. Now, how many women, whether you believe in the God that I believe in or not, how many women will want a man who says, you know what, baby, it's not about me, it's about us. It's not about my needs, but your needs and our family's need. You before me. I will lead by example. I will sacrifice. Now, you know who demonstrates that kind of love? Mothers do that all the time with their children. But a man was supposed to lead by example, doing that in front of their children, in front of their wives. So I believe a real man loves and serves sacrificially. Now, did Jesus do that? He did it in the utmost because he laid down his life for us and for the disciples and for anyone who would believe in him. And so he loved and served sacrificially. Here's the third thing that I think makes up a real man, and Jesus did this, that a real man leaves a legacy of faith. And I mentioned that earlier. See, it's not about what I'm doing right now in my family, Doree. It's about when I'm dead and gone, what would they say about me? That I had a large bank account? That I had multiple businesses that I ran? That I had some great stocks and bonds? Or would they talk about my faith to their children and then their grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren? I want my name to be synonymous with how strong his faith was and his integrity and his character. Now, obviously, Jesus was a perfect example of that because even now, over 2,000 years later, we still talk about the character of Jesus Christ, what he believed in. Even if you don't believe in what he believed in, we're still talking about what he believed in. I think a real man does that. Whether you believe in God or not, someone should be talking about what you believed in to your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. So those three things are the basics. And I'm going to add one that I think we're really missing in society that makes a real man. So one, he leads spiritually, leads his family spiritually, in that he loves and serves sacrificially. He leaves a legacy. And here's the missing component. I think why we're in trouble right now in our relationships as men, real men teach other men how to do all those things. Doree, that's the key. You have some men who've lived that life, but they failed to pass it on to the next generation. That's why I wrote Are You the Man? Because I wanted to make sure I'm passing on this knowledge and this information to my son, because I can't possibly take it all with me. And if I take it all with me, he has nothing left other than what he remembers. But Jesus did that for his disciples. Not only did he do all those things, he taught his disciples how to follow. And so the thing is that if we as men, a real man doesn't take his greatness to the grave with him, he leaves a legacy behind him and he teaches other men how to be great men.
You have to have that because, and this is my argument about the whole thing about single mothers being adequate or equipped or whatever to raise boys or raise children alone. Of course they can do it. You just demonstrated that they can do it successfully. Doesn't mean that you're going to be damaged and all of that necessarily. However, only a real man can teach a boy or a male to be a man. I can be so successful, I can be educated, I can be well-spoken, I can carry myself well in public, I can go to church, I could do all of those things. But I've never been and never will be a man, let alone a real man. I'll never be a male. Even if I change my organs, I'll never be a man, which I don't plan to do, by the way.
Doree, could I add this too? Because I really want, and my heart is just really, for some reason, being stirred to get this message to the women, is that mothers, women, you can encourage us. Okay. We need your encouragement. You play a vital role in the life of a male, of a man, a young man. We need your encouragement, but listen to me. Only a man can affirm another man. You can't affirm us. And I'm hoping that this is, I don't know if I can get really specific. You do not have a penis.
Hmm.
You can encourage us, but you can't affirm us. This is different. And let me see if I can put it this way. Doree, let's say you're my mom. There's a difference, and I love you to death, mama. Mama, you the greatest thing, sliced bread. Boy, when I make it to the pros, I'm gonna buy you a house, mama. It's one thing to say, Joe, you are a good man. That's one thing to hear from you. But to have a man who I respect and admire say, Joe, you have what it takes. You are a great man. You tell me, who do you think carries more weight? Hearing it from you or hearing it from my father? That's why, and I can't get women, and the women, if women battle with this, that's why they can't do it. They don't understand why we need another man to tell us. And here's a great example: what a woman should never tell a man: to be one. Never tell a man to man up, be a man, act like a man, put on your big boy pants. Don't ever even imply that to a man. You will emasculate him. But check this out, Doree. Another man can tell him all those things, and he will respect that. You see the difference?
Yes, absolutely.
That's why only a real man, like you said, can teach a boy how to be a man, because there's only certain things he can say to him that man will receive without feeling less than a man, that a woman will say to him, and now he's angry with that woman and resent women for that.
Yeah, it hits you so differently coming from a woman. That's a great segue. What do women, wives, girlfriends really need to know about men that they're dealing with, that they're involved with, that they live with?
Well, because that's a really open-ended question. And what I'll do is I'll try to keep it to what I think most women don't know. Because there's a lot of things that women know that, yeah, they should know about men. They may not have learned it yet, but I'm trying to look for those things that are kind of like, wow, I never knew that, that was about men.
Yeah.
And so I want to give them some ahas and then the reason I can tell you this, because my wife didn't know it. And so I figured my wife, she was a ex-cop, ex-military. And so she's been exposed. She led men. And so my wife is not the typical woman. She was actually a leader of men. And so she had men underneath her. And so my wife is like a G.I. Jane, so to speak. So when I shared some of these things with her, she said, Joe, I didn't know that. And for her to lead, she led more men than I did. And she didn't know this about men. So I'm going to share that with you. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. What I would start with, and there's no particular order, but I think that women need to know this, is that, and I'm not saying that this is right, Doree. Okay, let me qualify this. I'm just telling you it's the truth. Doesn't make it right. It's just information that you need to be equipped.
Tell it like it is.
Okay. Here's one of the first ones. Most men's self-worth and their identity is tied to their ability to provide for you. That's not right, but it's true. Our identity and self-worth, it's not right to read, but we equate that to our self-esteem. And God bless some of the women, because I have a very supportive wife. My wife is my biggest cheerleader. If we were homeless, she would be the kind of person, she ain't even mad. She's like, baby, it's my turn to hold the sign. That's how kind of woman I have. All right. But here's the problem. And she would tell me, just like most great women would tell their husband, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter if you lost your job. It doesn't matter if you can't buy us a bigger home. I love you. And you women think y'all being so supportive, which you are, but you don't understand this dynamic that our self-worth and our identity is tied into our ability to provide for you. And here's the best way I can explain it. If we were indeed homeless on the side of the street, me, my wife, and my 2 kids, there will be somebody drive up in their car, a family driving their car, and they would see my wife and they'll see my kids, and the first reaction would be, oh, that is so sad. But then they would get a glimpse of me walking behind the box, and they was like, what's wrong with him? Are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
This is my family. And they're thinking, they're not looking at what's wrong with the woman, what's wrong with the children. They're looking at what's wrong with the man.
Yep.
Society has to put this burden on us that our identity is attached to our self-worth. So the reason why I say women need to know this, so when your husband or your boyfriend, when he can't get a job, he's going to start acting crazy or distant, isolated. And you were like, what is this problem? I'm trying to affirm him. And I told you can't affirm him. You can only encourage it. Another man needs to affirm him. And so when he loses his job, you really have to handle him with kid gloves, because he's attaching it to his identity. So I think women need to know that. Here's another thing I think, whoa, this is big, because my my wife, I told her, I said, you really want to know the end of a relationship when it's starting to go downhill? This is what women need to know about a man. A man needs to know and believe he can satisfy and make you happy. Let me say that again, Doree. He needs to believe. Now, I'm not talking about just sexually, but in all areas, that he can satisfy you and make you happy. He needs to know that he's good enough. And here's the sign of warning signs when it's getting bad. If a man ever says this to you or to one of his boys, man, I don't know what's wrong with Doree, man. I just can't keep her happy. She's just never satisfied. No matter what I do, you can't please her. That is a warning sign that you either need to get him into counseling or you need to really address that issue very quickly. Because when he starts saying that, that means his eyes are going to start wandering other places. Because all it takes now is some woman who's not as attractive as you to stroke his ego. And now he's thinking, see, Doree doesn't get me, but this woman, she gets me. The woman with the limp and the bad eye, she gets me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's when women say, I just don't understand why he would go to a woman like that. Because trust me, she is encouraging him to say, baby, you're doing a good job. Where the wife is saying you're not good enough or implying that he's not good enough. Please don't do that. Please don't. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you the truth. And here's another thing I think women need to know that I think a lot of women don't know is that a man needs to know he can be vulnerable around you without appearing to be weak and you lose respect for him. Listen to what I'm telling you. Every man is hurting, but to different degrees. And he's looking for a safe place to share and a healthy place to heal. Because of our ego and our pride, we're afraid to go to a lot of men because that man is going to think we're a punk. And so I try to create safe places for men to come so they can be vulnerable. But a woman needs to provide that place for that man as well so he doesn't go to the arms of another woman who will let him be not as strong as he wants to be all the time. That if he does shed a tear, she's not going to think less of him. She would still respect him. Now, we're not talking about letting a man whine, and throw a tantrum. We're talking about when he's able to share with you that he's struggling. And I got to tell you, my wife said something to me about maybe a year or two ago that floored me, but it reinforced this, that I said, oh, that makes perfect sense. She says, Joe, do you know you're the strongest to me when I see you at your weakest? I'm like, what? She said, you're your strongest to me when I see you at your weakest. I said, baby, what do you mean by that? She says, baby, when you could tell me, baby, I need you to pray for me. Man, I'm really concerned and I'm worrying a little bit more than I should about our finances or about the children or about my position or whatever. She said, Joe, when you're able to share that with me, that tells me that you trust me and that means that you're willing to trust me with your vulnerability. And Joe, that's when you seem the strongest to me. And so I think a woman needs to know that she needs to allow him to be vulnerable without losing respect from him, if that makes sense, Doree.
Yeah, that's so true about being, when you can be vulnerable, it has to be in a safe place, like you said, but when you can be vulnerable, that does show strength because anybody can act like a tough guy.
Absolutely. And now here's one of the biggest things I think women need to know. And this is probably the one that shocked my wife the most. And if there's any single woman out there with children, they will be able to relate to this because they're single for a reason with a child and they're not with him. And I told my wife this and she said, Joe, you really believe that? I said, go back and look at your past of every male relationship you've ever been in and tell me if this isn't true. And I'm thinking, this is what I'm trying to teach my daughter this. And if she gets this, she will avoid catastrophes in relationships. I think a woman needs to know that a man is only as strong as the number of stronger men he has in his life. Doree, let me say that again. A man is only as strong as the number of stronger men he has in his life. And I challenge my wife and I challenge every woman that I know. I've challenged and I've never seen an exception. I said, look at the men that you've had in your past relationships and ask yourself this question about each one of them. How many stronger men who I respected that he was friends with? And I guarantee you in direct proportion, the number of stronger men that you respected in his life, the better man he was. And if you had a man who, quote, was a good man, but he didn't have other men in his life, that man eventually probably hurt you because he didn't have another man to keep him in check. Remember I told you that other guy to say, you stuck on stupid, stop it? That we need a number of other stronger men Like, Doree, they're listening to me right now and they say, wow, this guy's telling me stuff I haven't heard before. This is great insight. And they're thinking, wow, Joe is so wise. No, I'm not, Doree. Doree, what they don't see and what they don't understand is the number of men I have in my life. See, while you're hearing me speak right now, you don't hear Chris Ackerson. You don't hear my spiritual father, Howard Mintz. You don't hear my other spiritual father, Pastor Terry. You don't hear Theo Young. You don't see David Howell. You don't know Grant. You don't know Danny. You don't know John Ramos. I have hundreds of men in my life who are my insurance policy that I do not do to Tanya, my second wife, what I did to my first. Does that make sense, Doree?
Yep, you got accountability, and you've got accountability from the right people.
Absolutely. And I tell people this, and I tell men and women this. You show me a man who doesn't have accountability, and I'll show you a man who can't be counted on. You can't count on a man who doesn't have accountability. So if I am a woman, I'm telling you this is just straight up. If I'm a woman and I'm out there dating, trust what I'm telling you. Other than knowing what his name is and that he doesn't have a criminal record and that he's not trying to run from the cops and have a warrant on him, the thing I want to find out is how many men, first of all, do you have a man pouring into your life who holds you accountable? And if he says yes, I want to know how many, and I want to meet those men. I will never get in a relationship with a man who I haven't met his accountability. I will not do it. I think women are crazy for doing that. I would never do it. And I told my daughter, if you do not listen what I'm telling you, you're setting yourself up for failure. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. What I'm saying is this. If no man is showing him how to be a man, you now become a guinea pig in a test tube experiment. He's experimenting with you by trial and error. And how has that worked out for women? It hasn't worked out for them. And so get a man who has accountability.
Let's finish off by talking to the single moms out there that are raising boys. There's some things that they really need to know as well.
Yeah, what I would do, Doree, then I'm going to cover from this angle because, I'm going to touch on that real quick about that man without accountability. I'm not saying that he's a bad man. He's not ready. That's the key. He's not ready. Don't try to make him ready when he's not ready. It's just a not now. He may be Mr. Right, but not right now until he has accountability. And so don't compromise that. I'm begging. I'm pleading you. I work with hundreds of men now. That's my job. That's my full-time job, is to help men become better men by getting connected to greater men than they are. And I'm telling you, without exception, I'm scared of men who don't have accountability. I'm petrified of them because what that means is that they're like a loaded weapon pointed everywhere. And so I'm not saying that he's not a good guy. I'm saying he's not right for you right now. Give him some time to get that accountability. So that transitions to what I would share with women based on single moms, because I think this is important because my mom was a single mom and I saw her go through a lot of heartbreak. And this is my advice I will give to single moms with sons. The dad does not necessarily have to be in the son's life. That's great if he is. But what advice I would give to single moms is you need to recruit. When I say recruit, you look for a man, not to be in your life that you want to be in a relationship with. No, you recruit a man for your son. No different if you're looking for a job. As a matter of fact, I will pretend that like I'm looking for a job. That's how serious I would be about this, doing research. And what I mean by research, being observant at your churches, in your community, in your neighborhood. And what I mean by being observant, watch for men who have families and watch and see how their families respond to them. Look at how that man's wife responds to him. Look at how his children respect him. If you don't see the children respecting that man, that's not the right man. If that wife looks at him sideways as if she had a do-over, she would not marry him again, we're not talking about that man. I'm talking about looking for that man that you say, wow, they seem to be so happy. Because here's the great thing about looking for a man like that. See, we as men can fake it in the business world, in corporate world, because it's about achievement and performance. You know who we can't fake it with? Our families. They see us when we get up in the morning. They see us when we're angry. They see us when we're upset. They see us when we're irritable. They see us when we're not getting our way. They see us when we're not looking right. They know we can't fake it around our family. So if I can win the approval of my wife and my children, trust me, now I'm a successful man. So if I see a man like that, and I'm thinking about my spiritual father, that's how I found my spiritual father. I recruited him. Remember, I told you most men won't do it. But if I'm a single mom, I will go out and recruit as if I'm looking for a job. I'm interviewing men for a job. And this is what I would do if I was a female. And I mean, you can even notice them in restaurants. It doesn't matter where it is. Just be intentional about it. I would approach that man and say, could I meet with you and your wife? Now, the man is going to look at you like you crazy. Like, what do you mean? Can I have a conversation with you and your wife? And when he agrees to that, or if they're out to dinner, this is why the conversation would go if I was a woman. I just want to say that my family and I, my son and I, my daughter, we've been coming in this restaurant for weeks, and we always see you guys here on Sundays. And I got to tell you, I've been admiring you from afar, and I just love your family, and particularly you as the husband and father of this family. The way your wife looks at you and the way you guys have fun together when you come out to eat dinner, I mean, I can't help but notice it because I crave to have that kind of relationship one day. The way your children respect you and are mannerable when they sit at the dinner table, when you guys are coming out to eat, I'm just amazed, and I'm inspired by that. I know it's a lot of work for me trying to do that as a single mom, but to see the respect and admiration they have for you. The reason why I'm sharing this with you, because you see that little boy over there, that other booth, that's my son. And he doesn't have this type of influence. He's never seen this type of man before. He's never seen a successful husband, a successful father. I know you don't know me from anyone, but I just want to know, is it possible that I can get your number, ma'am, with your permission, that my son is able to talk to you and ask you any questions, maybe for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe once a month? Would it be okay if my son could talk to you and ask you questions about being a young man? Now, Doree, what do you think that man's going to say? And what do you think that wife's going to say?
They're going to be like, wow, they're going to be floored. They're going to be honored.
They're going to be honored. They're going to say, whoa, really? Because they don't think it's all that. And they're going to think, wow, yes, yeah, sure, we would do that. That's what I mean by recruit. Now, I haven't seen anybody do that. But that's what I did with my spiritual father. When I hung out with him for 5 days at his home with his 8 kids, 5 boys, 3 girls, and his wife, and I saw the look on her face every time he stepped into a room, and when I saw how his children respected him and admired him, and I saw how he prayed over his daughters and talked with his sons, he was taking me back to the airport, and I said, Howard, I know you got 8 kids, but would you adopt just one more? I need some man like this in my life. I said, I know I'm 33. I was 33 at the time. I said, I know I'm 33, but man, I have no idea to do. I don't know how to do what you just did in that family. I saw you for 5 days. That's real. I said, every day it was the same thing and the same response from your family. Man, I want that. Will you teach me how to do that? And Doree, he's been teaching me that way for 15 years. He texts me every other day.
That's a great tip for single women. And just in general, women that are single and maybe they don't have children, but they're looking for an ideal mate, observing how he carries himself and how people interact with him and how he is when, like you said, he's not at work, when he's just doing his own thing, people that know him the best. Dr. Joe, our time is running out quickly, and it's a shame because the time is actually flying, but I have to watch it because I know we can just talk all day about this, about families and relationships. But I want to make sure that we allow people to get connected, to hear more of this great wisdom that you have, that I know it's not all you and you're, giving credit to your spiritual fathers, but you are the vessel right now. And so I want to have you share information on your social media, your website, and what you're doing so we can stay connected.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity. And they can all go to one place to get everything that we've shared and everything I've talked to you about, because if they go to this one place, they can get our book, Are You the Man? 201 Lessons I Wish My Dad Would Have Taught Me, for free. Just go to realmenconnect.com. That's realmen, connect.com. And when you go there, you'll be linked to our social media pages. You can download our free app, which what I really love, because it gives them that experience and that wisdom all in the palm of their hand. So you can download our book and get it in your cell phone. So there's no excuse for a man to say, I don't know where to go, because in that app, it gives you access to all of our resources. So if they go to realmenconnect.com, they'll find out how to download our app for free. You can just go to the App Store and do that and just type in Real Men Connect and get it. but you can have access to everything that I've mentioned here on today's show.
Excellent. I'll link to that as well in the show notes for this episode. Dr. Joe, do you have any last words for us before we go?
I'll give a message to the men as well as to the women. And I'll start with the women because I have a heart for the men. So I'm going to start with the women first. We're not talking about your sons. We're talking about men in general, because even though you may already even be married, I need you to do this not just for your husband, but for men in general. Even though they may not always be worthy of respect, show them respect, because they'll live up to your expectations if you treat them as if they're already the person they're capable of becoming. In other words, if you give him a crown, he'll act like a king. So respect him, encourage him, because you guys are great at that. Encourage us. Pray for us and pray for him, for every man that you see who's trying to do his best on limited knowledge, and treat him as if he's already the man he's capable of becoming. Because if he can see what he can be, then he'll live up to what he should be. For the men out there, and I'm going to make this plain and simple for them, and it's not philosophical, it's just straight up. If you want to become a better man, and every man that I've ever talked to wants to become a better man, humble yourself and ask for help. The help is out there. I'm living proof, and I built a website where we have help for men out there who are looking for encouragement, looking for instruction. Humble yourself to admit that you need help. It's not your fault that you were not taught, but it is your fault if you know better and you don't do better now that you know.
Excellent. We're going to end on that. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Doree. Anytime.
If you like this show, I'd love to have your support. Visit patreon.com/kicking it with Doree, without the G, to learn more.